Welcome to Fishdoodle. Dad loved to fly fish for trout, and Dad loved to buy flies. He would read about them in Haig Brown's Western Angler and the Season series. He'd read about flies in Jack Shaw's Fly Fish the Trout Lakes. And he'd read about them in many of Art Lindgren's BC fly pattern books. And he'd buy them. And he'd buy them and buy them and buy them. He'd buy chironomids, shrimp and nymph patterns, Tom Thumbs, Kerry Specials, and 52 Buicks, Squamish poachers, sofa pillows, and a large variety of streamers. And as a result, his fly box would look like this. Large quantities of a huge number of patterns in sizes from 2 to 14. And he'd buy them at Ivor Williams Sporting Goods in Kerrisdale. He'd buy them at Roger LeConte's Motel in Merritt. And he'd buy them at Woodward's from Earl Anderson, likely after buying Mum a new suit at Chapman's. What I never realized, until our last years of fishing together, is that Dad rarely used more than a handful of patterns. And by far, his favorite was the Doc Spratley. As nimbleness of fingers began to fail him, I'd tie flies on his leader, and invariably he'd turn to me and say, "Ted, why don't I try the Doc Spratley?" And what a great choice it is. To quote Art Lindgren in his book Fly Patterns of British Columbia, Art wrote, "The Doc Spratley is my favorite fly for lake fishing. I have so many memories associated with the pattern that when I'm not sure what to use, the Doc Spratley often ends up on my line. Because I have the utmost confidence in the fly's ability to catch fish, I rarely regret that decision." The Doc Spratley, developed in the late 1940s by Dick Prankard and popularized in the interior lakes of British Columbia by Dr. Donald Spratley, a Mount Vernon, Washington dentist, is such a consistent fish catcher. It is indeed a confidence builder. No doubt, Art tied a few of Spratley's on Dad's line in Dad's last trip to Pennask Lake in 2009. The wonder of the Spratley is that it can imitate insects from dragonfly nymphs to chironomids, and can even imitate minnows on longer hooks. Tied with a thicker body, it makes a good low-light wet fly pattern for November steelhead on the Morris River. It's a true all-purpose fly. Now, fly fishers, they don't query what book they would want if stranded on a desert island, but rather the fly fisher imagine themselves isolated in trout country, by lake or by stream, and deriving options. What would be the best fly to have if I could only have one fly pattern? Well, for Dad, that was definitely the Doc Spratley. And tied here with black floss and tinsel and pheasant tips and a little bit of imitation white polar bear for a beard. And right now, here comes the peacock herl to make the wing sack. So, if any of you were ever fortunate enough to spend some time in a boat or along a stream fishing with my dad, chances are, when you looked over and saw him casting to trout, most likely the fly that was on the end of the line was the Doc Spratley. Thanks for joining us at Fishdoodle.